Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Srimad Bhagavatam, Grantha ki jai. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. So today we're going to study the philosophical concept of substance and category. This is a much debated subject, but today we'll understand why it's so much debated without everyone agreeing on it. But from the point of view of the Srimad Bhagavatam, there is total agreement of substance and category. And the reason there's no agreement amongst the materialists is because they're under the illusion of relativity. So we'll explain all these things now. Unless we understand things like this, we join the camp of the materialists, never coming to any fixed conclusion, but having a unending debate between different speculative ideas. If you read philosophy on this particular subject, substance and category, you'll see it's an unending debate of all the speculators, and nobody has the same opinion. And they keep coming up with different opinions all the time. So the materialists and the speculators, they have different concepts of substance. What is substance? So the realist philosophers, they say that substance is foundational or fundamental entities of reality. And the more subjective speculators say that substance is ideas. So when they say fundamental entities of reality, like for the atomic scientists, it's atoms, because atoms are the basic substances or substance from which everything is made in the material world. And for Plato, for example, he said that substance are the forms. The forms are Plato's conception of ideal forms that exist in his static spiritual world. And whatever we see here are imperfect reflections of those forms. So you see, I mean, we're not going to go into all the speculations, but this is also a speculation. Even Plato speculated. He speculated that the spiritual world is static, which is not true. Okay, so if we just stay with this realistic idea of substance, it's a foundation or a fundamental thing from which everything is made, such as atoms make up all as a substance of everything we see. But that's the material concept of substance. The spiritual concept of substance is different. In Krishna consciousness, the spiritual world, beginning with Krishna, would be substance, because everything is eternal there, and everything is coming from Krishna. So in the material sense, earth is substance, and pottery is a category of substance, because it is made of earth. It is earth with multiple functions that just earth cannot perform. So if you make a clay pot, it's made of earth, but it has some specific functions that just plain earth may not be able to perform, such as you can carry water from one place to another. You can carry certain objects like sand or marbles from one place to another in a clay pot. You wouldn't be able to do that just with earth. But the clay pot is just earth. It's nothing else. But it has a certain form, and therefore it has certain functions. So now we're beginning to get an idea of what is substance and category. The substance is, let's say, a real thing from which many other things can be made. However, we're going to see something very shocking now, that actually there are, let's say, there's a lot of confusion about this subject. Now we're going to explain why there's so much confusion. In the spiritual world, the absolute truth, which is Lord Krishna, is both subject and object. And there's no qualitative difference there. Now we're going to explain that. Like, for example, in the introductory mantra of the Ishopanishad, it says, Om Purnam Ada Purnamidam Purnat Purnam Udachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnam Eva Vasishyate. This is a very important mantra because it gives you an idea of the origin of all creation. It says, the Supreme Absolute Truth is perfect and complete. And because it is perfect and complete, everything that emanates from the Lord is also perfect and complete. And although infinite, perfect and complete unities emanate from the Supreme Absolute Truth or Krishna, still Krishna remains perfect and complete without being diminished at all. So, the personality of Godhead is perfect and complete, and because he is completely perfect, all emanations from him, such as this phenomenal world, are perfectly equipped as complete wholes. Whatever is produced of the complete whole is also complete in itself. Because he is the complete whole, even though so many complete unities or units emanate from him, he remains the complete balance. In other words, he remains complete. So in other words, this is a different type of mathematics. In the spiritual world, 1 plus 1 equals 1, and 1 minus 1 equals 1. In the material world, 1 plus 1 equals 2, and 1 minus 1 equals 0. So, Krishna is, and in the spiritual world you have what's called the fourth dimension, in which length, width, and breadth are infinite. In the material world, length, width, and breadth are finite. Therefore, it's hard for us to imagine what things are like in the spiritual world, because we are compressed, or we are limited in the material world. But when so the material world is a world of 3 dimensions, but when you enter into the 4th dimension, everything becomes eternal. And therefore this mantra is an indication of that eternal world. And it's speaking specifically of Krishna, who is perfect and complete. And that means that he's self-sufficient. And everything that emanates from him, like we emanate from him, we are the jivas, the individual souls. The material nature emanates from him. And all incarnations emanate from him. And everything like the spiritual effulgence emanates from him and comes into the material world as a reflection off of the sun, and and that spiritual effulgence is the source of our energy in the material world and the spiritual world. So everything is emanating from Krishna, but Krishna is self-sufficient, and everything that emanates from it is also self-sufficient. So therefore in nature you have the self-sufficiency which is maintained by cycles such as the carbon cycle, the water cycle, the wind cycle, the nitrogen cycle. There are many, many cycles in nature that make it self-sufficient and complete. So it's difficult. The reason we have difficulty understanding this, and I'm going to explain it right now. The absolute truth of Krishna is both the subject and the object. Let's say the subject would be Krishna as the origin of everything, and the object is everything that comes from him. So you come from him, I come from him, the material world comes from him, the sunshine comes from him, incarnations come from him, the material nature is coming from him. So everything we see coming from Krishna is also, to a certain degree in the material world, self-sufficient and perfect and complete. Like, for example, if a watchmaker makes a watch, the watch is not self-sufficient and is not perfect and complete, because the maker of it is not perfect and complete. In this sense, the watch cannot reproduce itself. But because a person, like you and me, come from Krishna, we are able to reproduce. But a person, a watchmaker, makes a watch. He cannot make a watch that can reproduce itself. See? So that proves that in the material world there's such a thing as relativity. And this is what confuses people. Now we'll discuss that in depth. This is why people have difficulty understanding God, even understanding themselves. It's due to this relativity in the material world. And relativity means one thing depends on something else. But in the spiritual world, everything is absolute and independent. In the material world, everything is relative and dependent. So the absolute truth is both subject and object, and there's no qualitative difference there. So that means qualitatively, everything that comes from Krishna is similar to Krishna. For example, we come from Krishna. So our soul is qualitatively one with Krishna. Quantitatively different, but qualitatively one. Like, for example, the salt in one drop of salt water is qualitatively the same as the salt in the entire ocean. Salt is salt. Right? So the amount of salt in one drop of water is the same as the amount of salt, if you're counting as far as percentage goes, the amount of salt in the whole ocean. So there's qualitative oneness between the drop of salt water and the ocean, the entire ocean. Quantitatively, there's a difference. Qualitatively, they're the same. So therefore, when it says the absolute truth is both subject and object, qualitatively, everything that comes from Krishna is the same as Krishna. What does that mean practically? Well, Krishna is Sat Chit Ananda Vigraha. He's a person, and he has a form that is eternal, full of bliss and knowledge. So we, as a spirit soul, as a jiva, we're also eternal, and we have our natural state is bliss, and we have knowledge. So qualitatively, we're one with Krishna. Quantitatively, we're different. Krishna is bigger than the biggest and smaller than the smallest. We ourselves cannot be bigger than the biggest and smaller than the smallest. We can be big or we can be small, but we can't be both at the same time as Krishna. And we cannot be as bigger than Krishna, and we cannot be smaller than Krishna. So Krishna has qualities that we do not have. When you count quantity. But if you count just qualitatively, we have the same qualities as Krishna. We also are Sat Chit Ananda Vigraha. But quantitatively, we're not equal to Krishna. So, therefore, okay, so you need to get these sheets of paper if you just came in. All right, I'll take two. I'll keep one. The subject today is called substance and category. Because you missed the first half an hour, you're not going to understand what I'm saying from this point on, but you can try. That's why it's good to come on time. You don't have to be confused in the latter half of the lecture. Half of the lecture is over already. Okay, so the absolute truth is both subject and object. But there's no qualitative difference, only a quantitative difference. Just like the subject can be earth and the object can be clay, a clay pot. So they're both one, they're both earth, but yet the clay pot seems to have certain functions that the earth doesn't have, right? But the clay pot only exists because there is earth. And they're both made of earth. Okay, so we are also Satchitananda, but quantitatively we're different than Krishna because he has infinite qualities of knowledge and bliss, and we have limited qualities of knowledge and bliss. We're both eternal, but Krishna's is quantitatively greater than us. So, the absolute truth is both subject and object, and there's no qualitative difference there. Therefore, Brahman, Paramatma, and Bhagavan are qualitatively one and the same. These are expansions of Krishna. The same substance is realized as impersonal Brahman by the students of the Upanishads, as localized Paramatma by the Hiranyagarbhas or yogis, and Bhagavan by the devotees. So, what does that mean? That means that depending from what position you observe Krishna, you might see something different. But you're looking at the same thing. Just like 5 blind men ventured onto an elephant. One touched the tail of the elephant, one touched the leg of the elephant, one touched the snout or the proboscis of the elephant, one touched the ear of the elephant, and so forth. Each one was touching the elephant, but each one's understanding of the elephant was different. One thought it was a snake because he was touching the tail. Another thought it was the trunk of a tree because he was touching the leg. Another thought he was like a big leaf because he was touching the ear. Another one thought he's like a pipe because he was touching the proboscis. Another one touched the ivory tusk, and he thought it was some type of hard substance like a stone. Right? Now they were all touching the elephant, but each one had a different understanding of what the elephant is. You understand it? Which part were you touching of the elephant? Yeah, you were not touching the elephant. But if you were, and you were blind, you would have a different understanding of the elephant than me or somebody else, because we were all touching different parts of the elephant. So in the same way, the Mayavadis, or the impersonalists, they think God is light, Brahman, effulgence. The yogis, they think God is Paramatma. And the devotees, they think God is Krishna, Bhagavan. Now, each one has seemingly a different understanding, but it's the same thing, understood from different angles of vision. So, in other words, Bhagavan, or the personality of Godhead, is the last word in the absolute truth. Paramatma is the partial representation of the personality of Godhead, and impersonal Brahman is the glowing effulgence of the personality of Godhead, as the sun's rays are to the sun. Perfect seers of absolute truth know well that the three above features of the one absolute truth are different views seen from different angles of vision. Just like if I see Agastya, so I think Agastya is a young boy. But if Agastya's mom sees Agastya, she thinks, oh, he's my son. And if Agastya's brother sees Agastya, he thinks, oh, he's my brother. And if Krishna one sees Agastya, he thinks, oh, Agastya is my friend. So you see, each person has a different understanding of Agastya, although Agastya is the same person. It depends from which angle of vision you're looking at him. And if Agastya sees Agastya in the mirror, he says, oh, that's me. Right? So, in the same way, people can have different understanding of who God is. Some people think God doesn't exist. That's one understanding. See, if you say God doesn't exist, that means you do accept that there's a God. You just don't know anything about him, that's all. Because you're saying the word God. You know, God doesn't exist. So, if there was no God, you would not have the word God. You understand? Like, if there's something that it doesn't exist, would you say it doesn't exist? You would have no knowledge of it. So you wouldn't even say it doesn't exist. The fact that you say God doesn't exist, that means God exists. You just have a negative view of what it is. Okay. There are many things we don't know about. We don't say it doesn't exist. We just don't know about it. But the fact that the atheists say God doesn't exist, that means he exists. Otherwise, they wouldn't be trying to negate his existence. Okay, so the perfect seers of the absolute truth know well that the three above features of the one absolute truth are different views seen from different angles of vision. The Supreme Truth is self-sufficient, cognizant, and free from the illusion of relativity. This is a very important point. This is the real crux to what we're going to talk about today. So, we're not talking about God. We're talking about the supreme absolute truth. There's a difference between the supreme absolute truth and God. Why? Because there are many gods. There's Lord Shiva, there's Brahma, there's Indra, there's Chandra, there is Durga Mata, there's this one, that one, right? So there are many gods, but the supreme absolute truth is only one. Why? Because the supreme absolute truth is that from which everything else is coming. Just like from the sun, the light is coming. But in the light, there's also heat. So many other things are coming from that one sun. So the supreme absolute truth is that from which everything else is coming. So therefore it says, Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. This is the beginning of the Srimad Bhagavatam, and it answers the ultimate question at the beginning of Vedanta Sutra, which in the beginning of Vedanta Sutra there's a question. Atato Brahma Jigyasa. Now let us inquire into the nature of the absolute truth. And the answer is Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. That absolute truth is Vasudevaya, the son of Vasudeva. That's Krishna. That's the answer to what is the supreme absolute truth. So therefore, Shiva is coming from Krishna, Brahma is coming from Krishna, Vishnu is coming from Krishna, Narayana is coming from Krishna, the material world is coming from Krishna, you and I are coming from Krishna, the sun, the Brahma Jyoti is coming from Krishna, all the incarnations are coming from Krishna. You know, Parasuram, and Nrsingadev, Matsya, and Varaha, everything is coming from Krishna. So he is the supreme absolute truth. He's not just God. And as I said, there are many gods. God means Ishwara, controllers. But Krishna is the Paramishwara, the supreme controller. Okay, so here it says that these three things, that is, Brahma Jyoti, Paramatma, and Bhagavan, these are three aspects. Vadanti tat tattvavidas tattvam yajganamadvayam brahmeti paramatmeti bhagavaniti sabhyate. It's Bhagavad Gita, first canto and second chapter, I think it's verse number 6 or 7. And it's saying that you can understand God in three different aspects: Brahman, Paramatma, Bhagavan. Now, even though there are these three different aspects of understanding God, or the Supreme Absolute Truth, the Supreme Absolute Truth being self-sufficient, cognizant meaning he knows everything, and free from illusion of relativity. Now, this is the main point. Relativity, the definition of it is one thing depends on another thing. Just like Agastya depends on his mother and father. Is that true, Agastya? Yes. Right. And the, let's say, the earth depends on the sun's energy. That's true. And let's say Amazon Prime depends on company Amazon. It's not independent, right? So that's what relativity is. One thing depends on something else. But absolute is different. Absolute means it doesn't depend on anything else. It stands independently. Right? So here it says that the supreme absolute truth is self-sufficient. In other words, it doesn't need anything else. It's cognizant, meaning it has full knowledge of everything. And it's free from the illusion of relativity. Now, why does it say the illusion of relativity? Einstein wrote the theory of relativity, right? Yes.
Relativity is like reality, so it's like free from the illusion. Illusion is like what's blocking you to see the reality.
Who said that relativity is reality? Yes. Yeah, that's, I stink. Yes, Shishna.
Is the relativity the material world? Like the three modes of material?
See, now we're going to lose. See, it says the illusion of relativity. Why does it say that? I mean, this is a hard question, okay? So don't feel bad if you can't get the right answer right away. This is a very hard question. Why does it say illusion of relativity? Okay, let me give you an example of the sun. Now, we see the sun as sunshine. Actually, it's sunshine right now. It's just the clouds are blocking it a little bit. Actually, the clouds are not blocking the sunshine. If you get in an airplane, you fly through the clouds, you'll see the sunshine. So the clouds are not blocking the sunshine. The sun is shining right now, perfectly bright, in other parts of the country, other parts of the United States. There are no clouds. So the clouds, what are the clouds hiding then? What are the clouds covering? Huh? No. What? Our eyes. No, there's no clouds all over the earth right now. I said the sun is shining brightly in other parts of the country when there's no clouds or very few clouds, right? So the clouds only cover our eyes. They don't cover the sun. But we say the sun is covered by the clouds. You see, it's a false statement. Okay. Now, why does it say illusion of reality? Just like we say the sun is covered by the clouds, but it's not true. That's an illusory idea. The clouds never covered the sun. Is there any history that the clouds were covered by the? No, that means that they would have to envelop the sun. They don't envelop the sun at all. They only cover our eyes. So, reality is actually an illusory concept. It's what keeps us in the material world. See? Like, for example, Narada Muni was only a 5-year-old boy when his mother died, and he had a single parent, situation. So his mother dies. Did Narada Muni die? So the idea that this 5-year-old boy was dependent on his mother is actually not a fact. It looks like that, but it's not a fact because he did not die. He continued to have a full life. So this relativity, one thing depends on another thing, is actually an illusory concept. That keeps us in the material world. We actually, it's like being in a jail where no door is locked, but we think it's locked because it's a jail. So theoretically, all the doors should be locked, right? And we're a prisoner in the jail, but actually, no door is locked. We just think it's locked. Okay, so. If relativity is an illusion, then that means something. So it says, in the relative world, the knower is different from the known, But in the absolute world, the knower and the known are one and the same thing. This almost sounds like Mayavad philosophy, but it isn't. Now let's analyze this. It says, in the relative world, and we are in the so-called relative world right now, but it's an illusion. Not the world, but the relativity is an illusion. In the relative world, the knower is different from the known. So, for example, I am different than the microphone, right? You are different than the carpet, right? But then it says, but in the absolute world, the knower and the known are one and the same thing. So, in the spiritual world, Krishna, let's say you're in the spiritual world right now. So in the spiritual world, you and Krishna would be one. What does that mean? What does that oneness mean? Does that mean you are Krishna? What does it mean? How are you one?
Same energy.
Okay, what are you going to say?
The same idea, like the same feeling about something.
You both have the same desire, right? It's like, if you're one with your parents, then if your parents say, look, we should all work together as one family unit. So if you agree with that, then you're one. You have the same desire to work cooperatively together. So, therefore, there's never any disagreement in the spiritual world. Everyone is working to please Krishna. No one's working to please themselves. So there's oneness. Just like yesterday, we had about close to 10,000 people who came. It was a huge festival. And we had, how many volunteers? Do we have 100 volunteers, isn't it? Yeah. So there was oneness. All the volunteers worked cooperatively together. And we were able to put that festival on, and everything went without any glitch, without any problem, right? And the people were one because they came to be happy, and they were all happy, right? And we came there to put on the festival to make everybody happy, and we all cooperated, and it worked. So that's oneness of purpose, one desire. Say. So the oneness in the spiritual world is actually, if we look at the verse in Bhagavad Gita, Sarvaguya tamam bhuya shinume paramam vacha. It's the 18th chapter and 64th verse. Isto si me judam iti tato vakshami tehitam. Krishna tells Arjuna, because you are my very dear friend, I am speaking to you my supreme instruction, the most confidential knowledge of all. Hear this from me, for it is for your benefit. So, in the purport it says that Krishna gives Arjuna knowledge that is confidential, meaning knowledge of Brahman. And still more confidential is knowledge of Supersoul or Paramatma in everyone's heart. And now he's giving the most confidential part of knowledge. Just surrender unto the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Krishna. So, in the spiritual world, everyone is surrendered to the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Krishna, and everyone has the same purpose in life. That is to please Krishna. And therefore, everyone's cooperating to do that. So there's oneness. At the end of the 9th chapter, Krishna has said, Manmana, just always think of me. The same instruction is repeated here to stress the essence of the teachings of Bhagavad Gita. This essence is not understood by a common man. Yeah. What are common people thinking about? iPhones, vacations, this thing, that thing, making more money, having more sense gratification, going on going skiing, going hiking, going here, going there. They're thinking of millions of things, but almost no one is thinking of Krishna. Right? But in the spiritual world, everyone's thinking of Krishna. So, this essence is not understood by a common man, but by one who is actually very dear to Krishna, a pure devotee of Krishna. This is the most important instruction in all the Vedic literature. What is the instruction? Always think of Krishna. Right? Therefore it says, Smartavya satatam Vishnu, Vishmartavyu najatuchid. Always remember Krishna, never forget Krishna. If you just follow these two rules, you won't have any problems in life. Right. Always remember Krishna. So what are our 6 points of logic? Anybody remember them? 6 points of logic by which you will live a peaceful, happy life and not have any problems. Anybody remember? Yes, Arush. Do we have a microphone? Yes, Arush, go ahead.
Accept everything which is favorable to Krishna consciousness.
Say that again, slower.
Number 1, accept everything favorable to Krishna consciousness.
Right, number 1.
Number 2, reject everything which is not favorable to Krishna consciousness.
Correct. Number 3.
Always remember Krishna.
Yes. No. Okay. Yes, you're right. Go ahead.
Number 4, never forget Krishna.
Right. That's 4.
Number 5, when in doubt, ask Shiksha or Diksha.
Guru. Exactly right. Number 6.
Do things which are pleasing to Krishna.
Only do things that are pleasing to Krishna. Yes.
And number 7, 3-point triangle of verification. Sadhu, Shastra, and Guru.
Yeah, perfect. Yes. Yeah, always refer something that you're not sure of to the triangle of verification. That's number 6. Sadhu, Shastra, and Guru. So, whatever Krishna has said is confirmed by the sadhus or acharyas, and it should be confirmed again by the Guru. Therefore, you can close the triangle. Then you know it's true. Where's an example where the triangle was not closed? What is that? What is the example of that? Bali Maharaj, right? Is that right? Is that what you're going to say?
No.
What were you going to say?
Like, it might not be related, but I remember once you were talking about, like, if your guru asks you to jump off a bridge, then, like, you can...
Well, yeah, that's related to this, yeah. Does that sound like something Prabhupada said? Or Krishna said? No. So, yeah, so you can't close the triangle. Okay, very good, Arush. Excellent. So we should not forget what we've learned previously. Yeah. What? Well, Bali Maharaj's guru, Sukracharya, had taught him that Yagyavai Vishnu, that Vishnu is the beneficiary of all sacrifices. right, of everything. But when Vishnu appeared as Vamana, on the day where Bali once a month was giving charity, he said, that's Krishna in this, appearing as a dwarf Brahmana. Don't give him anything, because he'll take everything away from you. So this was a disconnect for Bali, He said, well, wait a minute, I can't close the triangle here. He told me previously, and the acharyas have said, and he's guru, right? Sukracharya is a guru. So the acharyas have said, always Krishna is a beneficiary of everything. Krishna has said that, Bhoktaram Yagatapasam. But my guru, he also said it, but now he's saying no. So he refused to follow that order, which normally you have to follow Guru's orders, except if he contradicts what Krishna and acharyas have said. So you're not able to close the triangle. You see? Okay, so then it says, this essence is not understood by a common man, but by one who is actually very dear to Krishna, a pure devotee of Krishna. This is the most important instruction in all Vedic literature. What Krishna is saying in this connection is the most essential part of knowledge, and it should be carried out not only by Arjuna, but by all living entities. So what is Krishna saying? He's saying, because you are my very dear friend, I am speaking to you my supreme instruction, the most confidential knowledge of all. Hear this from me, for it is for your benefit. So what is that most confidential knowledge? Man mana bhava mad bhakto madhyaji mam namaskuru mam evaisasi satyam te pratijane priyosime. That is, always think of me, become my devotee, worship me, and offer your homage unto me. Thus you will come to me without fail. I promise you this because you are my very dear friend. So this is the most confidential part of knowledge. That is, one should become a pure devotee of Krishna and always think of him and act for him. Now, you're going to school to have knowledge, is it right? Is that right? Are they teaching you this? No. So, therefore, you're not really getting knowledge. This is the most confidential part of knowledge. And they're not giving it to you. In fact, if you said, well, can you teach us this? They would say, no, it's not allowed in our school. Is that right? So, what kind of school is it then, if it's not allowed in the school? I say, doesn't make sense, does it? The most confidential part of knowledge, by which one can become a complete success, that is, overcome the cycle of birth and death, and attain immortal life, eternality, bliss and knowledge. Say, so this is a dilemma. This is a disconnect. This is a problem. They're denying. If you say, "Well, can you teach this?" No, we're not allowed to. Well, what kind of school is that? They're not allowed to. What kind of knowledge are you going to teach then? So, one should not become an official meditator. Life should be so molded that one will always have the chance to think of Krishna. So this should be our motto. We should mold our life in such a way to always think of Krishna. What happens if you do that? Well, we saw it yesterday. That's one example of it. Or we see it in the temple also, when we're having so many different festivals in the temple. When everybody cooperates by remembering Krishna and remembering what our real duty in life is, that is to please Krishna, sam siddhir haritoshanam, right? So actually there are 7 points of logic. Number 6 is sam siddhir haritoshanam. Perfection of life is to please Krishna. And number 7 is the triangle of verification. Right? What?
speak about.
Yeah, you mentioned that. You mentioned that. So I'm just saying this. You actually said 7 points. You didn't say 6. Okay, so one should always act in such a way that all his daily activities are in connection with Krishna. Life should be so molded that one will always have the chance to think of Krishna. He or she should arrange his life in such a way that throughout the 24 hours he cannot but think of Krishna. And the Lord's promise is that anyone who is in such pure Krishna consciousness will certainly return to the abode of Krishna, where he will be engaged in the association of Krishna face to face. So everyone said, oh, I can't see God. How can I believe in God? Well, wait a minute. This is explaining the way to see God. See? I can't see Trump. Yeah, you can't see Trump unless he invites you to see him. I mean, you can see him on the news, but you can't see him in person. So if you can't even see Trump in person, how are you going to see God? How are you going to see Krishna in person? Right? You can't even see Trump. Right. But there's a process. There's a process to see Trump, and there's a process to see Krishna. You have to follow the process. If you say, oh, I can't see God, therefore I can't believe in God. Well, dummy, there's a way to see God. If you really want to see, then come to the temple and learn how to see God. Or remain a dummy. Well, we say, oh, I can't see God, therefore I can't believe in God. Idiots. They're idiots. They're stupid. The process is there. It's simple. Yes?
You can say that I can't see your brain, therefore it doesn't exist.
Yeah, you can say that too. Or the blind man says, I can't see the sun, therefore it doesn't exist. That means they're ignorant. See? And the people say, oh, I can't see God, therefore I don't believe in God. Well, because you're ignorant. The process to see God is there. It's pretty simple. It's not difficult. You just don't want to see God. That's the proof. That's the real issue. You don't want to see God. Because when the cat's away, the mice will play. See? So if you reject believing in God, then you can sin all day long and not feel guilty about it until you get the reactions. And then you say, maybe I made a mistake. Just like this one famous actor. He was a famous movie star. And he was dying of cancer. And one of the last things he said was, oh, I think I ate too much meat and did other bad things. That's why I'm dying so young. That was the last thing he said. You say, another dummy, another idiot. Right? He saw that there was a correlation between all the drugs and meat and nonsense that he did and the fact that he was dying young. Young means he's only like in his 40s, right? Dying of cancer. Yeah. How much punishment can the body take? You know, someone is like going like this. Yeah, putting smoke into his lungs. Does that make sense? Is that the purpose of the lungs, to get smoke? Huh? No. You're killing yourself by doing that. The whole idea, you know how stupid people are that smoke? The lungs are meant for extracting oxygen from the air. If you put in smoke, you're extracting nicotine, which is a toxic material. So people have become stupid. I mean, it's unbelievable how stupid they've become. You know? Because they're not interested in Bhagavad Gita. They're not interested in Krishna. And they don't want to feel guilty about engaging in sinful activity. So what do? They refuse any knowledge of God. That way, they don't feel guilty until they get the reactions for all their stupidity. And then they think, oh, maybe I made a mistake. But now it's too late because you're dying. Right? Yes? Is that your question? Hare Krishna. Don't say
When I was in my science class, we were doing like something about innovators. So like one of them were like some person who made like cigarettes.
Oh, they were studying the...
And then that's why like people say that they smoke because they wanna honor that person.
Wow, that's really great. This was a discussion in your class?
Yeah.
So was that a good thing that they were honoring that person, or a bad thing? Well, but how did the teacher present it? Did she present it as a good thing or a bad thing?
Bad.
Oh, okay, yeah. Yeah. There's a little bit of truth. Yeah. Did she say that believing in the Big Bang is bad? Or believing that we come from monkeys? Did she say that's a bad thing?
No.
Did she say that was...
Doing anything about it.
Did you do anything about the monkeys?
No.
Not yet. Okay. Oh, gee, you got a lot to look forward to now. Yeah.
In the 1900s, there was like some Christian cult, and they
Christian what?
Christian like cult,
Cult,
yeah,
yes,
some
okay.
religious cult, and they forbid Darwinism to be taught in public schools, and that's why still now you can't learn Darwinism until like high school. So they don't teach it until high school, apparently.
No, it's not true.
No?
They teach it earlier. Okay, wait a minute. You went through elementary school.
Yeah.
Did they teach Darwinism?
No.
Okay. Well, you see, you're not as lucky as the kids in India. Kids in India get the opportunity to learn Darwinism before high school. That's why India is more advanced than the United States, you know. Okay, so the most confidential part of knowledge is spoken to Arjuna because he is the dear friend of Krishna. Everyone who follows the path of Arjuna can become a dear friend to Krishna and obtain the same perfection as Arjuna. What was Arjuna's perfection? Yeah, personal association with Supreme Absolute Truth, personality of Godhead. Okay, so coming back to what we're discussing today. In the relative world, the knower is the living spirit or superior energy, whereas the known is inert matter or inferior energy. Therefore, there is a duality of inferior and superior energy. Whereas in the absolute realm, the knower and the known are the same energy, both spiritual. This is why people are confused in the material world. They see this duality between themselves and matter. Okay? Because they're conscious and matter is not conscious. This is confusing. Because of this duality, they cannot understand the spiritual world. If everything you see is duality in the material world, how can you understand the spiritual world where everything is one? Like, for example, is politics one or dual? Dual. Yeah. Everyone has a different opinion, right? There's the love Trump and hate Trump, right? It's dual. So, can the politicians ever imagine a time where they all will agree? Very difficult. Very difficult. In fact, probably impossible in their mind. They'll never agree. All right. So that's why this duality in the material world between matter and living entity is confusing. So when you see, everybody and everything in this world seems to be a combination of matter and spirit. So then when people see, oh, Krishna appeared in the material world, so he must be like us, made of matter and spirit. He's got a material body, and maybe he's got some kind of a consciousness or soul. Is that true? No. Krishna's body is Satchitananda Vigraha. It's not made of matter. So now we understand why people have such a difficult time understanding Krishna, because we are subjected to this duality between matter and spirit, or matter and consciousness. So we cannot imagine that someone can appear amongst us and has a spiritual body, because all our bodies are made of matter. So, in the relative world, the knower is the living spirit, or the superior energy, whereas the known is inert matter, or inferior energy. Therefore, there's a duality of inferior and superior energy, whereas in the absolute realm, the knower and the known are of the same energy. There are three kinds of energies of the supreme energetic, but the material world is inferior energy. The living entity in contact with the inferior energy is illusioned, thinking he belongs to the inferior energy. Therefore, there is a sense of relativity in the material world. In the absolute, there is no such sense of difference between the knower and the known, and therefore everything there is absolute. So, it says here, we, the living entities, the jivatmas, we're in contact with the inferior spiritual energy called matter. And because of that contact, we think we are just matter. Right? We don't actually believe that there's a soul. If there is a soul, we believe it's made of matter at some point of evolution. Okay? So, and this sense of relativity in the material world, meaning one thing depends on another, and when both things are relative, then we can't imagine anything being absolute. Right? So if we have a soul, it's also made of matter, and our body is made of matter. So we can't imagine that someone can appear like Krishna and his soul and body are both spiritual. It's incomprehensible. So, therefore, there's a difference in the material world between the knower and the known. The knower is conscious, the unknown is not conscious, and the known is unconscious, or matter and spirit. But in the spiritual world, everything is spiritual. So, for us to understand the spiritual world is almost impossible, unless we have the help of bona fide gurus and bona fide knowledge, as given in Bhagavad Gita. So now, if we go back to the Bhagavatam, this is now 3rd Canto, Part 2, Chapter 27, Understanding Material Nature. So it says, this is Lord Kapila speaking, he says, when the living entity is thus unaffected by the modes of material nature, because he is unchanging and does not claim proprietorship, he remains apart from the reactions of the modes, although abiding in a material body, just as the sun remains aloof from its reflection on the water. So, when we're in the material world, if we are always engaged in devotional service, we rise above the influence of sattva, rajas, and tamas. What is sattva? You know what sattva is? Okay, rajas. And tamas? These are called the three modes of material nature. When we rise above the influence of the three modes, then we're no longer affected by anything in the material world, and we don't claim to be a proprietor anymore. So, we live in a capitalistic country today, so capitalism protects proprietorship. So, I think I own my car, I think I own my car, I think I own my body, I think I own some land, or I think I own some stocks, or I think I own this or that, right? But when you rise above the concept of proprietorship, I think I don't own anything. Everything belongs to Krishna, right? And therefore, real knowledge is how to use everything correctly in Krishna's service. So therefore, I'm no longer influenced by the modes of material nature. I'm not trying to own this and own that. I try to use everything in service of Krishna, right? So, then it says, when the soul is under the spell of material nature, that means under the spell of this illusion of relativity, and I have false ego, I identify with the body as the self, and I'm absorbed in material activities, and by the false ego, I think that I am the proprietor of everything. This is our situation in the material world. Now your homework is to read Canto 3, Chapter 27, verse number 2. Canto 3, Srimad Bhagavatam, Chapter 27, 3.27.2, verse number 2. Chapter 27, verse number 2. Okay? So, I mean, actually, read verse 1 and 2. Verses 1 and 2. Explain what is the mentality of a person under the influence of the three modes of material nature. What is the mentality of a person under the influence of the three modes of material nature? And then explain what is the mentality of a person who's free from the influence of the three modes. You'll be able to understand that by reading those two verses. You're going to read chapter 27, verses 1 and 2. Explain what is the mentality of a person under the influence of the modes of material nature, sattva, rajas, and tamas. And after you do that, explain the mentality of a person who's not under the influence of the modes of material nature. Yeah.
So, how to convince the Hindu who believes Shiva is the
Shiva?
Shiva is the supreme Lord and not Krishna. Even though I tried saying something like that, or saying that Shiva Bhagavatam or Gita, but I was not able to convince anyone.
Oh, we've already studied that. And you have to look in your notes. But we'll go over it. Not now. We'll go over it again. We went extensively into that subject over a year ago. The difference between the demigods and Krishna. But we'll do that again, but not now. This is more important right now. Yes?
We have one question in the context of that you have explained oneness in purpose.
Yes.
And you have also explained when we do festival and events, we come together and
We have one purpose.
one purpose.
Ultimately, the purpose is to please Krishna.
Yes.
And
My question is in this context. The question is when we try to come together and serve for the one purpose, still there are some conflicts comes, even though it's a positive conflicts, like one person wants to.
Well, no, those conflicts are resolved by the overriding purpose.
Okay, I will just take an example. Let's say we want to do some specific service
Yeah.
in the festival, and one wants to do in some with X way, and person 2 wants to do some Y.
That's
way.
why there's an ultimate authority, me, for the festival, not for the whole universe.
So my question is,
Like, for example, yesterday, I intervened. I said that they were not cooking the pakoras correctly. They said, no, we always put it on 375. I said, it's too hot. Oh no, if you make it lower, it'll be more oily. I said, that's good, because it's the oil that gives the taste. So we lowered the heat to 325, and people loved the pakoras, whereas at 350 it was burning the pakoras. Then I also said that we should give the combo plate, right? Was that popular? Yeah, it was much more popular than just the chole or just biryani, right? So I intervened in many different, and I also took the hose out. The hose, if the food inspector saw the hose, she would have given us bad marks, because that hose was not compliant. It was not a food grade hose. But everybody said, "Oh no, we checked the label and it said it's okay for potable water." I said, "That doesn't mean it's food grade." They all believed that they did the right thing. It was like stupid, right? Food grade is a very specific thing. It was just what they bought were just ordinary garden hoses. Just because it says you can pass potable water through it, that doesn't mean it's food grade. So I intervened in many different things yesterday.
So how to resolve the conflict is good authority?
Yes, right? When in doubt, what's point number 5, Arush? Yeah, very good. You got it?
And the second question is, are there conflicts in spiritual world as well for the same purpose?
There's not conflict, but there are different opinions. Like you have gopis that are leftists and gopis that are rightists. See? So they both want to please Krishna, but they have a different idea how to please him. And they compete with each other. But that competition is positive, because everything gets better through it. It's not negative. It's not like competition inside Microsoft or Google, where one group is trying to destroy the other group to get ahead.
Third question is, in the material world, we are getting this conflict because of the lack of knowledge or because of making the conception of living? What is the cause?
False ego. False ego. See, false ego says, oh, this other guy is an idiot. I know better than him. Real ego says, he wants to please Krishna, I want to please Krishna. So if he pleases Krishna before me, I'm happy. And if I please Krishna before him, he's happy, because we both have the same purpose. Okay? But false ego says, I have to please Krishna, nobody else is allowed to please Krishna, They're all a bunch of idiots, No. Okay? So we have our homework, and okay, let's just go over this one more time, because it's not an easy thing. Our whole discussion today was on substance and category. So what is a substance? Like earth is substance. It's something real, right? But pottery made from earth is a category of that substance. Okay, so that gives you an idea. Substance is something real. Now, of course, when we're talking from a spiritual point of view now, actually substance from the spiritual point of view is the spiritual world, is actually Krishna. That's the real substance. And category is everything that is coming from Krishna. Okay, that's the real thing. In the material world, you could say earth is substance and pottery is a category of earth. Right? And there are other categories also. But if you ever go to a philosophical book, a philosophy book, and look up substance and category, oh my God, you're going to get confused right away. And the more you read, the more confusing it becomes. There's so many different concepts of what is substance and what is category. And they don't agree. See, this is what happens when you don't have reference to the absolute truth. Everything becomes complicated and impossibly complicated. If you read, I was reading this morning the discussion of substance and category amongst the speculators. It's almost impossible to understand. Just like if you read some science book, advanced science book, sometimes it gets the language and the way they're presenting different ideas, and it's like almost impossible to understand. But when you have reference to the absolute truth, the supreme absolute truth, then it's much easier to understand. Everything becomes clearer. Okay, so it says, in the relative world, the knower is the living spirit, or superior energy, whereas the known is inert matter, or inferior energy. Now look, the key word here is the relative world, meaning the material world. That's not the case in the spiritual world. In the spiritual world, the knower is Krishna, and the known are the spirit souls, or jivas, and they're both one in quality. But in the relative world, the material world, the knower is the jiva, and the known is matter. They're not the same. They're not the same. So we have to learn to see everything from the spiritual point of view. This is the whole purpose of this discussion today. Then we don't get confused. Haribol.
यशोमती नंदन ब्रजबर नागर गोकुल रंजन काना यशोमती नंदन ब्रजबर नागर गोकुल रंजन काना गोपी परनदन मदन मनोहर गोपी परनदन मदन मनोहर खलिया दमन विदाना अमल हरिनाममिय विलासा अमल हरिनाममिय विलासा विपिन पुरंदर नवीन नगर बर बंसी बदन सुवासा प्रजजन पालन सुर कुल नासन प्रजजन पालन सुर कुल नासन नंद गोधन रखवाला गोविंद माधव नवनीत तास्कर गोविंद माधव नवनीत तास्कर सुंदर नंद गोपाला यमुना तट चर गोपी बसन हर रास रसिक कृप मोया यमुना तट चर गोपी बसन हर रास रसिक कृप मोया श्री राधा वल्लभ वृंदावन नटवर श्री राधा वल्लभ वृंदावन नटवर भक्ति विनोदाश्राय Bhakti Vinodashaya Yashomati Nandana Brajabara Nagara Gokula Ranjana Kana Yashomati Nandana Brajabara Nagara Gokula Ranjana Kana Jayo Radha Nila Madhav Radha Nila Madhav Radhe Jayo Radha Nila Madhav Radha Nila Madhav Radhe Jayo Sitaram Jayo Sitaram Jayo Sitaram Jayo Lakshman Hanuman Jayo Lakshmi Narasimha Jayo Lakshmi Narasimha Jayo Lakshmi Narasimha Jayo Lakshmi Narasimha Jayo Jagannatha Jayo Baladeva Jayo Jagannatha Jayo Subhadra Jayo Jayo Prabhupada 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 Jayo Jayo Prabhupada Jayo Jayo Gurudev 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 Jayo Jayo Gurudev Nitsai Gaura Hari Bol Hari Bol Hari Bol Nitsai Gaura Hari Bol
एवं विश्वपाद परम सत्योय का राष्ट्र श्रीमद् भक्ति सिद्धांत सरस्वती गोस्वामी महाराज प्रभुपाद की अनंत कोटि वैष्णव की नामाचार्य श्री हरिदास ठाकुर प्रेम से बोलो श्री कृष्ण चैतन्य प्रभु नित्यानंद श्री अद्वैत गदाधर श्रीवासादि गौरव भक्तवृंद की श्री श्री राधा नील माधव की वृंदावन धाम की मायापुरी धाम की जगन्नाथपुरी धाम अयोध्या धाम गंगा माँ की यमुना माँ की तुलसी देवी की भक्ति देवी श्री हरिनाम संकीर्तन मृदंग की सामवेद भक्तवृंद की all glories to Asamudi, all glories to Asamudi, all glories to Asamudi, all glories to Sri Guru and Gauranga, all glories to Srila Prabhupada ki.
Shrestha did a homework assignment for the last homework assignment. Did you bring it with you? I have it. Okay, you can read it. Here, you have a microphone.
So the homework assignment was write the real explanation of the material creation as opposed to the Big Bang Theory, and then tie in the causes and the effect. And
Okay, read that again. Read it again.
write the real explanation of the material creation as opposed to the Big Bang Theory, and then tie in the causes and the effect.
Tie in the?
The causes and the effect.
Yes.
So, the creation of the material nature is falsely understood by the scientists as the Big Bang. These people believe that the entire material world was generated by the explosion of a single point of infinite density and temperature. But something cannot be created from nothing. How can a point, which means an object of no measurement or volume, have infinite density and temperature? The argument seems to refute itself. Now let's talk about the explosion. Think of Michelangelo's famous sculpture, The Pity. To create such a detailed and beautiful sculpture, there needed to be the material to create the sculpture and then an intelligent person to carve the material. Without the creator, the marble is just marble. It cannot create itself into a magnificent sculpture. If one applies the Big Bang Theory to this scenario, the block of marble would have been incinerated, definitely not turned into a sculpture. Hence, how can a perfectly ordered universe be the effect of such a catastrophe? It cannot. Therefore, we have to understand that behind the creation of the material world is also a supremely intelligent creator. In the Sri Ishopanishad, the invocation prayer is Om Purnam Ada Purnam Idam Purnat Purnam Udachite Purnasya Purnam Adaya Purnam Eva Vashisyate. The personality of Godhead is perfect and complete, and because He is completely perfect, all emanations from Him, such as this phenomenal world, are perfectly equipped as complete wholes. Whatever is produced of the complete whole is also complete in itself. Because He is the complete whole, even though so many complete units emanate from Him, He remains a complete balance. This verse perfectly explains why Krishna is the supreme personality of Godhead and is the creator and the maintainer of the material world. Our well-ordered material nature can only be created by someone who has such intelligence, Krishna. So how was this material nature actually created? This phenomenon is explained in the Srimad Bhagavatam, 3rd canto, 6th chapter. The Supreme Powerful Lord then simultaneously entered into the 23 elements with the goddess Kali, his external energy, who alone amalgamates all the different elements. The 23 elements are all of the elements which matter is consisted of. These elements are the senses, the working senses, the sense objects, the elements of nature, the evacuating organs, genitals, and speech and mind. These elements could not have been combined by themselves. Therefore, Lord Krishna enters these elements. Now, for us to be living human beings, there needs to be 25 elements. These last two elements are Lord Krishna, Paramatma, and then the soul, Jiva. Now, just like how Michelangelo's carving techniques and strokes were present on the Pity, Krishna shows up in us as Paramatma, the causes and the effect. This is a proof that Lord Krishna creates and maintains the material nature.
Oh, wait a minute. Just read that last sentence again.
This is a proof that Lord Krishna creates and maintains the material nature.
Yeah, because He enters into everything, and everything is made from His energies. Yeah, okay.
The Big Bang Theory is false because, number one, it says that something can be created from nothing. Number two, it says that matter creates itself because there's no innate creator behind it. Number three, it says that nature can create itself even though it is explained in the Vedas that the elements can only be activated by Krishna. Number four, it shows that the cause is not in the effect because the effect of an explosion cannot be an impeccably organized universe.
Perfect. Very well done. Very well. So, did anyone else do that homework? No. Don't raise your hands at the same time. Okay. So, that's very well done. You see, yeah? You did? Okay, go ahead. Give him the microphone.
I didn't do the causes and the effect part, but
Okay.
I explained the process of creation.
Go ahead.
So at the start, the Lord in his plenary portion entered into the elements of the universal creation, and they transformed into the gigantic form in which all the planetary systems and all movable and immovable creations rest. And then the demigods entrusted the Supreme Lord with the task of constructing the cosmic manifestation. Being thus prayed to by the demigods, Lord Krishna thought to himself and thus manifested the gigantic form or the Virat Rupa for their understanding. Agni or heat came from his mouth, and all the directors of material affairs entered into it in their respective positions. By that energy, the living entity expresses himself in words. When the palate of the gigantic form was manifested, Varuna, the director of water, entered, and thus the living entity has the facility to taste everything with his tongue. When the Lord's two nostrils separately manifested themselves, the Ashwini Kumaras entered them, and because of this, the living entities can smell the aromas of everything. Thereafter, the two eyes of the gigantic form of the Lord were separately manifested. The sun entered them with the partial representation of eyesight, and thus the living entities can have vision of forms. When there was a manifestation of skin, Anila, the deity directing the wind, entered with partial touch, and thus the living entities can realize tactile knowledge. When the ears of the gigantic form became manifested, all the controlling deities of the directions entered them with the hearing principles, by which all the living entities hear and take advantage of sound. When the hands of the gigantic form became manifested, Indra entered them, and thus the living entity is able to transact business for his livelihood. After that, the legs of the gigantic form manifested, and the demigod named Vishnu, not the Supreme Personality of Godhead, entered with partial movement. This helps the living entity to move to his destination. When the intelligence of the form became manifest, Brahma, the Lord of the Vedas, entered into it with the partial power of understanding, and thus an object of understanding is experienced by the living entities. After that, the heart of the gigantic form separately manifested itself, and into it entered the moon demigod with partial mental activity. Thus the living entity can conduct his mental speculations. Thereafter, the ego of the gigantic form separately manifested itself, and into it entered Rudra, the controller of false ego, with his own partial activities, by which the living entity transacts his objective actions. After that, when his consciousness separately manifested itself, the total energy, Mahat Tattva, entered with his conscious part. Thus the living entity is able to conceive specific knowledge. From the head of the gigantic form, the heavenly planets were manifested, and from his legs, the earthly planets, and from his abdomen, the skies separately manifested themselves. Within them, the demigods and others also were manifested in terms of the modes of material nature. After that, the power of protection was generated from the arms of the gigantic Virat form, and in relation to such power, the Kshatriyas also came into existence by following the Kshatriya principle of protecting society from the disturbance of thieves and miscreants. The means of livelihood of all persons, namely production of grains and their distribution to the prajas, was generated from the thighs of the Lord's gigantic form. The mercantile men who take charge of such execution mercantile men who take charge of such execution are called Vaishyas. Thereafter, service was manifested from the legs of the personality of Godhead for the sake of perfecting the religious function. Situated on the legs are the Shudras, who satisfy the Lord by service. All these different social divisions are born with their occupational duties and living conditions from the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Thus, for unconditional life and self-realization, one has to worship the Supreme Lord under the direction of the spiritual master.
Very good. And where did you copy that from? Third chapter? No, I know. First, was it first canto?
Third canto.
I mean, third canto, first part?
Chapter 6.
Chapter 6, you're right. Okay, good. That's the first one. Very good. Well, see, both explanations make it clear that everything comes from Krishna. And yours are much more detailed about all the different steps of going from subtle to gross, how everything is produced, everything is coming from is the body of Virat Rupa. But Shrestas is more, I would say, more philosophically inclined, because when you show how the cause is in the effect, then you understand more clearly that what happened originally is still happening now. Therefore, it's what you did is what your explanation is more, let's say, on a practical level, right? Hers was a little more philosophical. Both are good. Both are very good. They complement each other. So thank you very much. Okay, so we have homework for next week. Now, you're going to put on the skit that you've prepared? Is that right? What?
One question.
Yes.
Today's talk, illusion of reality.
Yeah.
If people misunderstand it and they think they are not dependent on anybody, even if they are not independent.
Okay, I'm glad you brought that question up. I just want to explain something about it. That's what I was looking at while in the opening of the deities. The illusion of reality, illusion of relativity, it's that the knower is different from the known. That's the illusion. The knower is different than the known. That is what the illusion is. Now I'm going to explain that. In the spiritual world, the knower and the known are non-different. Krishna is the knower, and the known is the living entity. Therefore, the living entity being part and parcel of Krishna, and both are spiritual. There's oneness, right? Oneness in purpose, and oneness in energy. They're both internal energy, right? Or superior energy. Whereas in the material world, the knower is the living entity, and the known is the material energy, or material nature. So, the material nature is inferior energy, and the spirit soul is superior energy, right? So, the illusion of relativity is that the knower is different than the known. And that the living entity is actually superior energy, and the material energy is inferior. Now, because of that, when people hear that Krishna appeared in the material world, they think he's like us. His body is made of material energy. And there's a confusion. And also, the living entity, who's superior energy, he becomes attached to the lower energy, through family affiliation, through acquiring possessions and all these things, and becomes attached to that. So he loses his understanding of his superior nature, right? So that's the illusion of relativity. by associating with the material energy, we believe that we are material energy also. Okay. And if you study Einstein's theory of relativity, he has two theories. One is special relativity and general relativity. It reinforces this idea. His two theories of relativity you say, puts us in this realm of we are matter. We're not spirit. And that is the illusion of relativity. See? When you say one thing is relative to another, and both things are relative, then it becomes an unending, let's say, series of illusions. Actually, we are all in relationship to Krishna. But this theory of relativity, as a scientist present, is that one temporary thing is relative to another temporary thing. So you end up with an infinite series of relative things that only confuses you. Right? So they talk about quarks and black holes and strings and this and that. So it's just one long series of confusion without ever coming to a absolute, right? So that is why it says the illusion of relativity. Yes?
I wanted to share something like that
what it said in in my science class.
Yes.
Like we were studying black holes, and then it said if you go.
See, you're studying black holes in elementary school?
No, middle school.
Oh, middle school. Okay.
So if you survive the gravitational pull and you go inside the black hole and you're still alive, then they say that you might go into an alternate universe.
Right. There's two ifs there. Right. And they're big ifs. Yeah. So do they describe what the alternate universe is like?
They said you're gonna come in the exact same place, and when you come out, there might not be a black hole there, so you might not come back to your universe, and it could be completely different, and there might be no living things, and you could die really quick.
Wow, sounds like really fun. Yeah. Yes? The same thing about black holes? Yeah. See, I told you, Yeah. Well, black hole is what it says, a black hole. It's something where you don't see anything. Right? So it's an illusory place. That's why I say, as long as you remain in, this is called the illusion of relativity. See, what you just described is an illusion. It doesn't actually exist. Right? That's why, they describe something, but if you look for it, you're not going to find it. And you're not going to, it's not a real thing. And that's why this relativity of one thing relative to another thing relative leads to a long list of irrational, unreal things. You can talk about it. Like I can explain to you that there is what's called what do you call that? Yeah, palace in the sky, right? Now I can describe the palace to you. Will you ever find a palace in the sky? Oh. You see, that's the whole point. I can say, it's got 15 towers, and it's got, it's got an underground cellar, and it's got a video room, and I can explain it to you. Will you ever see that palace in the sky? No, you won't. So, because we're talking about things relative to other things, and both things are not real, right? So as long as we deal with, as long as we're concerned with things like that, we end up confused. Now, what did they say? If you survive, right, but you'll end up in another universe, and what? You'll eventually die? Is that what they said?
Yeah, because you're,
yeah.
If you don't find an inhabitable planet, then
Yeah. If you
your oxygen
Tank will go out.
Yeah, your oxygen tank will go out. Yeah. I see. It's all ridiculous. It's all fantasy. There's nothing real about that. That's why the real substance is Krishna and the spiritual world. And there is no relativity there. You have an eternal soul. Krishna is an eternal soul. You have a body that's made of spiritual energy. Krishna has a body that's made of spiritual energy. So everything is real. Everything is eternal. Everything cannot be destroyed, right? But in the relative world, things exist for some time, then they stop existing, right? So you end up basically with an illusion. That's why it's called the illusion of relativity. Einstein's theory of relativity is also an illusion, although they call it science. But in that science, there are quarks, there are black holes, there's strings, there's this, there's that, you know. And it's all illusory. It's not actually real. Why? Because it doesn't last eternally. Only things that are eternal are real. So you have an eternal soul, but in contact with matter, you think that you don't have an eternal soul. You think you think that you're just a body. So you end up in this illusory world. And we're chasing after bodily pleasures. We're chasing after temporary things. And eventually they'll all disappear. See? Okay, so we won't continue anymore. We'll talk about this some more. But you see, Bhagavatam is giving us the realistic view of life. And your homework for next week is important. Everyone should do this homework. You have to understand what the illusory mental state is. And then you can understand what the real mental state is. Yes? Yes, sir. Does the sun go around the earth, or does the earth go around the sun? Which one do you think? Sun goes around... Huh? The sun goes around the earth, or the earth goes around the sun? Yeah, well, that sounds right. That sounds right. There's a lecture where Prabhupada speaks about that. I can play that lecture for you, where he explains that. I was reading it the other day. Okay. The earth, first of all, revolves on its axis. That's one rotation. Then the earth rotates around the sun. And then the sun, the earth, and the whole galaxy rotate around the polar axis. So you have these three rotations going on, right, simultaneously. You understand? So at some point, you might think that the sun is rotating around the earth, because everything is rotating around this, the whole galaxy is rotating around a universal axis. So there might be an impression like that. Yes?
Because I heard somewhere that in Srimad Bhagavatam it said that the sun goes around the earth.
That's why I'm saying, because the earth and the sun go around on a polar axis of the universe, you might have the impression that the sun's going around the earth. All right, we'll talk about that some more. Okay. But you see, there's not just one thing going on. There's simultaneously, there's these three rotations going on. So in some at some point of those 3 rotations, it might seem as if the sun's going around the earth. Anyway, we'll talk about it again. Haribol. But do this homework for next. This homework for next week is very important. Okay, Haribol.